Hello, and welcome again to The Goddess in Art. This series is dedicated to the oldest and most enduring tradition in art, the Goddess in Art. My name is Starr Goode, and my guest this evening is artist Christopher Castle. His work has been exhibited widely throughout Europe and the United States, as well as being in the collections of the British Museum and the National Museum of Wales and Scotland. Together with his wife Layla, he runs the Spotted Fawn Gallery in Point Reyes, California. Welcome, Christopher.
Thank you.
Christopher, as well as being a visual artist, a painter and a printmaker and a drawer and all kinds of things, you're also a scholar of geomancy, which is the divination of the earth spirit. And you've been involved with the British earth mysteries, or sacred sites, for over 20 years. As we know, throughout the British Isles, there's sites where there's over 900 stone circles, and the most famous is, of course, Stonehenge, and there are many other earthworks. And these were built by Neolithic people who felt that this land, these sites, had a very special energy. Now, in your art, you often portray landscapes, but they're not just, pretty nature scenes or, gosh, what a lovely tree. For me, they're always infused with some sense of mystery, some perception of mystery, and I'm sure that, you draw on your own experience. And it resonates with this earlier Neolithic tradition that the land is alive. So, in your art, do you feel that there's some new awakening of an old sensibility?
The subtlety of prehistoric cultures is what is missing from our awareness today. The subtlety that I experience through studying these sites and these places has been badly suppressed for many centuries. And so my work is in an attempt to re-establish contact with that subtle experience, that subtle perceptual experience, and to find what the depths of the psyche of prehistoric peoples was as it emerges through these sites.
And what is that experience? I mean, you're there, and I mean, obviously, as Americans, I mean, you're English, but as Americans, we're really cut off from tradition. We're really cut off from the land. We just came here, and we're 200 years old, and we're the new kids on the block. But in England, you're right there on the land, and there is that tradition. So,
well, I'd say that there are plenty of people in England that are also out of touch with their sense of the earth.
Yeah, that's true.
But the movement from Europe to this continent has created in many people's lives, even though it may have happened several generations back, some kind of trauma deep down inside themselves, and the necessity for re-establishing this contact with place, the individual's sense of their own place is essential at this time, it seems to me, in order for us to find out why the environment, for example, is becoming so upset and imbalanced, and our lives in relation to that are imbalanced.
Well, what I was curious is what really is the experience, I mean, of being there. I mean, it seems so much of it is, your sense of relationship to the land, again, seeing the land as alive, but it isn't just, maybe in your paintings it's portrayed perhaps in an abstract way, or that it's a symbolic way, but there's a real concrete experience that you have.
Right, well, this has developed over a long period of time. In my case, it started with a need to find a cosmology of my own place, something that would satisfy a spiritual need inside myself. And I mistook that for several years in a kind of psychological journey to the east, as many people did, and then realized that I needed to find something more indigenous to my own cultural background. So I started looking for something more local in the way of a cosmology, and through Arthurian legend and looking at the places associated with Arthur, I came into contact with the land again, and through that process started looking at other kinds of ancient site, and realizing that the implications of these sites were just so wide and had been almost totally missed by archaeology. And at the same time, there were a number of people working along similar lines in Britain, researching and exploring what the meaning of a stone circle, for example, although many other kinds of site, alignments of these sites called lays, and the associated kind of experience, sensations that these alignments bring up, and so we got together as a group and started exchanging ideas about it, and this developed into the Earth Mysteries movement in Britain.
I know for me I had to almost go back to England and my roots to contact the land in that sacred way, you know, maybe my own, I don't know what it was, but just to be there in that calling. It is almost like the land is calling to us again in the earth, I mean, and
the earth itself seems to have a memory that is transmitted through, particularly through these sites. The sighting of ancient sacred places was all important, and was a way of bringing together the energies of the earth, was a recognition of those particular energies. And in going to such places now, we enter into a time, or a lack of time, a timeless state. There's that possibility. They're like windows through which, or they're like the Australian Aborigines call the coming in and going out places, the places where one can enter into this dream time, as they call it, or sort of non-time, timeless state, and experience the same experience that prehistoric peoples experienced of the land, this identity with the land.
See, to me, one of the fascinating things about your writing, I mean, of course, and it's in your artwork, but you have this concept of holographic, and that is that the part, you know, by experiencing a part, we can tune into the whole.
Right.
And in the sacred sites, I mean, the land is there, and often, so we have the land, and also there's these earthworks or these circles, so we have, you know, those ruins, and they're there, although some of them are very intact. And for me, that's something that is so edifying, because the art is there, no matter how dried up the interpretations of the archaeologies are, no matter how much the scholars want to just catalog and take and squeeze the spirit out of something, the art is still there, the land is still there, and the truth of that is still there. And I think that's something that's so important about what you're talking about.
Well, I've looked at tiny fragments of pottery from different sites. I've looked at different kinds. All these things are just traces, really, of a total culture. So when you take just a part of that culture in the form of, say, a piece of pottery, and you see a thumbprint on it, or you know, a fingernail mark on it, that immediately brings you into contact with that individual that has handled that piece. If you have a sensibility to it, you can, in some way, and through the patterns and by taking sort of parts of this great weaving, shall we call it, together, and drawing the links between them in your own mind, you can recreate this total picture. That's what it seems to me. So in that sense, it's a holographic fragment, like taking a hologram and smashing it in pieces, and each piece has the total picture in it.
So just as that artist had a particular sensibility, you as an artist are tuning into that sensibility and developing your own sensibility. And I wanted to turn to this painting we have in the set here. This is Newgrange, Ireland, and this is an oil painting by you. And I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about this and tell us about Newgrange. It's a site in Ireland. And
right. Newgrange was particularly important to me. It's become the equivalent of England's Stonehenge in terms of the number of people that visit it now.
Oh, really?
It's a very important site in that kind of way. But before that, it was a very important site. It was perhaps part of Ireland's great heritage. It's one of 3 great mounds in what is called the Bend in the Boyne. It's a bend in the River Boyne that flows into the Irish Sea. And this particular site consists of a huge mound surrounded by a stone circle, and this is the entrance into the mound. And the entrance stone is carved with these incredible spiral patterns, and the main feature of the site is that the orientation of the passage and chamber are towards the winter solstice sunrise, so that when the sun rises over the horizon, over the River Boyne, it shines just at that time of year into the passage, 80 feet up into that passage, I think it's 80 feet, and illuminates the chamber inside. Wow. And that's the only time of year it does that. So it's a very significant moment of regeneration of the whole year. It signifies the rebirth of the sun, one could say,
and
from the earth.
Yes, and that it shows that, again, that sensibility and how tuned they were, tuned in, our Neolithic ancestors, to these cycles. And
to
again,
the
in
annual
this,
cycle, right.
Yeah, in this painting, we see it infused with that mystery and that language of the goddess and the spirals.
Yeah, I've tried to illuminate something of what archaeology finds. You know, this is part of my mission, I'd say, is to take the coolly collected archaeological material and breathe some chi, life energy into it, or to recognize that chi and to illuminate it by my painting. So that's the significance of using these brilliant colors on the stone, is to bring out this sense of a subtle kind of energy beyond just the form of the thing.
Yeah, now I'd like to take a look at some of the other pieces of art that you brought, because we can see more of the kind of work and what your exploration is. So let's take a look at some of your other work, okay? All right, if we can have that. Okay, now here we have a stone circle.
This is Boscawen in the Land's End region of Cornwall, and I visited there midsummer to observe the sun's movements, and this is the sunset actually, and a beam of light shining into the stone circle. Spirals of energy within the circle of stones, indicating the kind of generative force that these places create.
Okay, and then again, it's always the spirals, that language.
Right. It recurs over and over again in Neolithic sites. This particular one is in Anglesey. It's called Bryn Cethlu Dhu. It's a mound with a passage going inside as Newgrange. Inside there's a standing stone which just almost touches the roof. It's a beautiful, tall standing stone, and the carvings that I've painted in the sky come from a stone also from this chamber.
Again, a lot of symbols that we're working with here. Very sophisticated sense of things.
Right. The symbols begin to give us, here again in Newgrange, this is inside the chamber of Newgrange. We have this triple spiral.
I love this painting with the sense of dimension and mystery. And
This is the moment of midwinter when the sunbeam comes in. I've painted it as a narrow beam, but in fact it's broader than that and illuminates the whole place. The triple spiral indicating the triple goddess associated with Newgrange, Bridget in her 3 aspects. And here, this is an etching based on a dolmen, so-called called the Giant's Ring in Northern Ireland. And above it, in the sky, we have a goddess figure from Malta. So here I'm trying to link sites from different parts of Europe, and also the concept of the what archaeologists call a burial chamber. So I have a burial in the ground beneath it, but also the mother figure representing the womb. So the tomb and womb become one in this image.
The great round, the great cycling of life.
It's aligned in that sense. And here again, another Neolithic site from Portugal this time. A great square arrangement of stones with this huge pillar in the middle, The site is called Youre. It's right near the Spanish border in eastern Portugal, and in the ground we have placas, schist placas, thin slivers of stone marked with kind of energy vibrations of individuals that these placas were found with in their graves. I think they represent the different kinds of pattern of those individuals' energy. And in this site, this one comes from the west coast of Ireland. It's Clew Bay. I was travelling in the west of Ireland and saw this site totally unmarked on a map, and found just by chance this alignment running through to an island in the distance, and then two notched islands in far distance.
So it wasn't on any map, but somehow you knew you were experiencing something here.
That's right. I saw this magnificent standing stone with some other stones just below the great mountain of Crowpatrick, the sacred mountain. Yeah. So, and actually here's another sacred mountain, this time from Utah. This is one more recent painting done while I've been in this country, and it represents Ute, the sacred mountain of the Paiutes, as a sleeping goddess. And in the foreground is Hovenweep, and the whole scene is being activated by a lightning flash. And in the bottom right we have petroglyph patterns, sort of elemental patterns emerging from cracks in the ground. So the whole place is being activated by this electrical energy.
Well, it's certainly very vibrant. This is one of my favorite pieces too, the Valley of the Moon in Napa. So you're covering all kinds of continents here.
This is near where we used to live, the Valley of the Moon, actually Sonoma. And the patterns involved with the mountains here, there are 4 mountain views, 4, each one of them in fact has patterns from the local Indians' basketry, indicating sort of elemental patterns indicating mountains and the elements in general, cloud patterns and water patterns. It's the flow of energy represented in those baskets is kind of similar to the energy that you get from the patterns in Neolithic pottery, the zigzag patterns. And so it's a continuation. This work that I'm doing here with the Native American material is a continuation from the European, which is what I wanted it to be when I came, actually.
Well, it's interesting because we've looked at different cultures. When we've been in Europe, when we've been in the United States, and we see, you know, we mention the goddess, and we see in the earthwork sometimes there's a mound, and that's the pregnant belly of the goddess. Or we see in the lay of the land the sense of that she is the earth and the mother. But in other cultures, like in Neolithic Old Europe, the goddess was actually represented in a figurine of the female's body. And that's another view, because the goddess is like the central force behind all of these cultures. And I know you also deal in, you know, your art has a whole other aspect of dealing with making images of the goddess directly. I mean, this is indirect, but we feel her presence. So I wondered if you could talk about that.
Yes, these earlier pieces were more kind of stating the concept of the cyclical, the whole cyclical sense that we've lost, or we tend to ignore in our lives, and to our peril, we ignore it.
Yes.
So, but Neolithic people, particularly in the north and western part of Europe, created these sites to state this sense of the cyclical and to honor it. But in other parts we find many more actual images of the female, of the feminine spirit of the earth, we could say, and different aspects of the feminine obviously are represented in these figurines. And so I've traveled to different parts of Europe looking at these figurines too in the museums and so on, and doing drawings of them and studying their significance. And slowly over the years it became more than just a study. It entered into my life in a much richer kind of way. So I'm beginning to find, I feel, just scraping the surface of a renewed sense inside myself of a kind of divine feminine spirit.
Well, I know that your work just isn't about portraying something, you know, like again a landscape, or just
Right.
being, you know, historically correct. Although of course you're really interested in the details, and you're quite a scholar. But it's for your own life. It's for your own being. It's for, you know, your own soul, really, and your own life experience. And I think that that's really important. And that led you to something which I think is sort of intriguing, which is the study of icons. I mean, you have your work from Neolithic Britain, you know, Native American, classical Greece, and then you also went into like Catholic Poland. So I think that that's very interesting, that eclecticness. So tell us about that.
I had a great opportunity in going to Poland and to study ancient traditions and practices there, folk practices, and I found one of the major traditions was the honouring of the great Black Madonna of Częstochowa. The icon, it's a Russian icon that was brought there 600 years ago, and it's performed miraculous services for the Polish people and is called the Queen of Poland. And in my my own visit to this site, this monastery where it's housed, I evolved a great attachment to this image. It's a very beautiful image, and decided I should study it through painting it, and I painted it many times in different kind of guises, looking at it in many different ways. And finally I met somebody that back in London, that could teach me how to make icons by the traditional technique. And my study of this particular image progressed through all these variations of the feminine spirit in this Christian context.
And it's also a very more intimate thing too, to be doing these icons. I mean, doing that figure.
Right. Yes, icons themselves represent the archetype of that particular image, and in looking into the icon, we find a reflection of that within ourselves. So in painting one is really establishing contact with the archetype within, and it's an incredible alchemical process, the painting of an icon. Whereby you explore the image itself, but as you explore it, the whole process, the actual physical process of painting the icon is alchemical, one could say, using raw materials and transforming them into this refined kind of spiritual sense, and
that's
changing the material itself. Yeah.
Okay, let's take a look at some of these images you have of, like, specific images of the goddess. Let's take a look at some of your work here, okay?
Okay, well, I started work with images specifically of the goddess with these images from Malta. I visited Malta and saw various images in the museums which came from the goddess temples on Malta, and studied them very closely, did drawings and so on. These are 3 images that I worked on as a series, and they represent different parts, different aspects, I think, of the feminine. It's come clear to me. The basic icon of the goddess in Malta is a rounded, full, mother-type, nourishing goddess, fertility goddess. But these ones have something else to say, I think. They're almost like individual portraits. Or they go into specific aspects of the feminine, and that really interested me. The patterns around each one of these come from carvings on the temple walls in Malta and the altar stones. So these in themselves become icons. And this one was later, I did this one from a Polish figure that I saw in the museum in Krakow, southern Poland there. And seems to be a bird-headed goddess.
Yes.
She seems to be floating there in space. She's surrounded by these discs that also come, some from Neolithic sites and some from later sites. They're either weaving spindle whorls or
and
you
really, the way you did it draws us in. It really draws us into that world.
Right. Again, moving on with other icons from prehistory. This one is from the Minoan. It's a very well-known Minoan snake goddess with dolphins on a wall behind her from the Minoan temple site of Knossos, and she was found at this site. She represents the energy of Kundalini, the electric serpent energy.
This is one of my favorites, this corn goddess here.
She, actually, this is one of the few images that I've worked on that I haven't actually sort of really come into close contact with. However, it was so rare an image
Yes.
that I wanted to use it and to explore it. It's from southern Utah, from the Fremont culture, which is about 1,000 years ago now. And it's a corn deity, little clay terracotta figure. So that also exists in this country, although rather rarely, it seems.
Yes, which is very intriguing. Here we have the great Black Madonna here.
Yes, this was actually my second icon, using the traditional technique of gold leaf on a wooden-based panel and egg tempura, pure pigments with egg. And most artists in Poland, I realized, had done a version of this image. Everywhere I went, I found in all the museums there were various versions by modern artists of this image. So everybody explores it in Poland, and I had to too. So moving on with the same technique, which was why I originally studied icon painting as such, I used egg tempera and gold leaf again on this image, and using the kind of icon form with these prehistoric images. This is the Minoan labyrinth and labrys, double axe, from Crete.
And using that gold, and this here's another gold leaf, it does give it such a sense of dimension and mystery. And
right. Well, originally the gold meant the other world, the transformed world. So the background on which the figure is the transformed world. This is a prehistoric Cretan figure.
Just the little bit of time we have left, I just wanted to say, you had said something once that I found very, very moving, which was that your life was about, you know, as human beings, we have the same needs as our ancestors did, spiritual and physical needs, and that the basic need, or your life, was about building your own cosmology, incorporating your experience into your life and your worldview. And I just wanted you to comment on that, because I found that such a heart-stirring statement.
Right. Well, people have lost a sense of a total cosmology, although it's a great need. And for me, this bringing the goddess into my life through these prehistoric images has been all important, and it seems to me that the world needs this, especially the male world these days.
Yes, I wanted to say you're only the second man I've had on the show, and it's been really wonderful to have you here, and an inspiration
have many more.
for other men too, and thank you for your contribution.
Thank you, Starr.
Okay, and thank you for watching. Good night.
Kayu